Welcome back, friends. Dan Vega here, and today we're building a Spring Boot 4 REST API the fast way. Now, this is a little bit of a parlor trick, and the reason I say that is if you've been around as long as I have, you can remember back to a time when Ruby on Rails came out, and they had a build a blog in 5 minutes, and that was really cool. It taught you the power of convention over configuration, right? But it was also a little bit of a parlor trick because while we could build a blog in 5 minutes, that is not something we would take to production. So similarly, we can build a Spring Boot 4 REST API really quickly and get up and off the ground and do some really cool things because of some configuration and things that Spring Boot does. But if we are going to go to production, there are a lot more things that we probably need to do to make that kind of a full application. So what we're going to do today is I want to tell you a little bit of the origin story of why I'm putting this video together. We'll start out, we'll build a brand new app. We'll build the REST API together. I'll show you how quickly you can get that up and running. My plan is to take this a step further and in the new year, build out a full Spring Boot 4 course that covers a lot of the new features in Spring Boot 4, how to get things into production, the whole kitchen sink. And we're going to use this as kind of a jumping off point for that. If that is something you are interested, I want to know that that's what you want. If you want that, I need to hear from you in the comments below. Let me know if that's something you're interested in, some things you would like me to cover. This is really going to be a full course on building a project together using Spring Boot 4. All right. So let me know in the comments below. Until then, we're going to jump over to my screen here, and I'm going to start here because this is where this all kind of started from. I don't know if this is real, but it got a good giggle out of me. So there was this post on Reddit. It said, rewrote a perfectly good microservice just for my SDE3 promotion at Amazon. So there was a legacy Java service running fine for 5 years. First off, I know we run a lot of Java apps at Amazon, so this is believable so far. But I needed scope and complexity to justify my move from an L5 to an L6. So I wrote a 20-page design doc arguing that we needed to modernize our stack by rewriting the whole thing in Go with a complex microservice architecture. I wasted 4 quarters of engineering time and 3 other engineers' lives. The new system is actually slower and costs 2 times more to compute, but the launch email looks strategic enough to get my packet approved. I officially got off the promo last week. Today I accepted the internal transfer to a chill core infra team. The memory link in the new service usually hits around 2 a.m. and I won't be on call. Good luck to the new grad taking over. So there are a lot of things about this, right? It is kind of believable that somebody could put a plan together to do this kind of rework and move over to another service just to get a promotion. I've seen similar things like that before. Now, I commented on here and said, in short, Java's greater than Go. I was just kind of being silly and cheeky, right? That's not the whole thing to take from this. Part of this is don't rewrite entire systems just to get a promotion. In this case, they moved from, I don't know if the original one was written in a monolithic application, but rewrote and Go, moved to a complex microservice architecture. Everybody wants to move to microservices, but there's real complexity in distributed architecture, right? So I'm not dunking on Go here. Lots of great languages and frameworks can do a lot of really good things. I'm just saying don't move to another language just to move to another language, right? Anyways, I was just having fun with this tweet and I got some comments below. And one of them was, hey, I have a question. Why is building an API with Spring Boot harder than Python, JavaScript, or PHP? Even the frameworks of those languages are easier to use than Spring Boot. And I sat there and thought about it for a minute. And I said, wait a minute, building REST APIs in Spring is really easy to do. And then I had to step back a second. I'm like, well, it's really easy for you, Dan, because this is all you've been doing for years and years. And so you have some institutional knowledge that makes it a little bit easier to do. I will say again, whatever language or framework you're using, having that experience with that language and framework makes everything much easier. There are times when you can probably choose one over the other. My good friend Nate Shuda always says, it depends, right? It depends on the requirements. But in this case, I just want to go through building a simple REST API to show how easy that is to get up and running. And then again, hopefully we'll carry this over into the new year into a brand new course. So we're going to start here. I have the initial fast path. Now, to build the Spring Boot REST API, I'm going to hope you have some experience with Java. You really have to have kind of a base foundation of Java to get started with Spring. Somewhere in the base to intermediate path would probably be best. But if you don't, you can follow along here. The first thing you're going to do is head over to JetBrains' website and download IntelliJ IDEA. That is my IDE of choice, and I'm going to have you use that here just to get to stay on the same page as me. Now, in the past with IntelliJ, you've had to download like the Ultimate Edition or the Community Edition. Community is free. Ultimate, you have to pay for it, and you get some more features out of. They've combined that into a single IDE. No longer do you have to choose that. You can, of course, pay for the extra features, but things that weren't included in the community version earlier on are now included there, including the Spring Initializr. So you can do it right within your IDE. We're going to do it from a website today, but that is the first place. Once you have IDEA, JetBrains IntelliJ IDEA downloaded, you can start a new project and download a JDK right from there. So no longer do you have to go hunting for a JDK or install a really great tool that I love like SDKman to manage multiple versions. You can download it right within IntelliJ. So that's a really good, easy way to get up and running. Once you have the IDE, once you have the JDK, you are ready to build a Spring Boot app. So what we'll do is we'll head over to start.spring.io, which is the Spring Initializr. I'll talk through your choices there, and then we'll build out a simple controller that is basically going to handle HTTP requests and return responses. This is kind of the central component to building a REST API. This comes from the MVC world, Model View Controller. If you want, you can go ahead and read up a little on that. But this is kind of the air traffic controller. It takes in requests and returns responses. So if you did the parlor trick, I could do this really quickly and make a really quick video and do this in a matter of minutes. No manual Tomcat configuration, no complex XML, just code and run right from your IDE. I'm going to step back and explain a few things, but that's the idea. From there, we can move into a full CRUD API. Again, the parlor trick of getting something up and running is nice, but as we start to build production-ready applications, there's going to be a little bit more involved. So we're not going to do things like validation and error handling today. We are not going to set up an entity layer using something like Spring Data. We have a service layer where we could have business logic. In the repository layer, we can have like data access abstraction. So if you didn't want to write out full SQL, then using something like the JDBC client, you could use something like Spring Data and abstract that away so you don't have to write a lot of those CRUD operations. Then we have things like configurations and profiles and testing. Again, this for me is like the min MVP to get something that is like production ready to go. There is more that can go into this, and this is what I want to cover in the full course where we talk about a lot of the new features in Spring Boot 4. So again, I want to hear from you. I don't want to sit here and waste my time if it's not something you want. If it is something you want, let me know in the comments below. So we are going to start here at start.spring.io. If this is new to you, this is a way to bootstrap a Spring application, and it gives you a bunch of choices. This does not generate a whole bunch of code based on what you select. It generates the bootstrap of an application, and that is an important distinction. It is going to set up your app, give you everything you need to get started, and then we still need to write the code for, say, the REST API here. So you got to pick your build tool. So in this case, I'm going to choose Maven. Gradle is another build tool in the Java ecosystem. You can pick a language. I'm going to use Java. There is also Kotlin and Groovy. You're going to pick your version of Spring Boot. In this case, we're going to pick 4.0. And then this is just some metadata about your project. Nothing you do here is going to be a wrong choice. Usually when you set a group, you kind of do it in reverse order of your domain. So my domain is danvega.dev, so I do it in reverse order of that. We are going to be building a meetup replacement, and not replacement, but kind of styled after organizing with groups and events and members. But we're just going to start with a group today. So we have this. I'm going to use JDK 25. You can configure your application using properties or YAML format. Again, no wrong choice here. And then here is where you select your dependencies. I like to think about this as like if I was going to make a meal, I would write down a list of ingredients. When I go to the grocery store, I know what ingredients I got to pull off the shelf and put into the cart. In this case, I know what kind of app I'm building, which is really minimal at this point. So I have to pick the dependencies, the ingredients that I need to make this meal. In this case, I'm just going to be building a web app. So I'll type in web, and that will give me Spring Web. That gives me a Spring Boot Starter Web MVC, because we're building an MVC stack here. And it gives me all of the things that I need to build a web app. Things like building RESTful applications, Apache Tomcat as the embedded container. So we have a server that we can start up and get running right away. Jackson 3 underneath the hood. So if I want to do some serializing and deserializing of data, that happens for me automatically. There's a bunch of things that go into the starter and the auto configuration of things in the application. But all you need to know now is we are building a web app, so we are choosing web. From there, you can hit generate. This will download a zip file, unzip the zip file, and then go ahead and open this up in whatever IDE you're using. Hopefully we're all using IntelliJ today, but you could even use something like Visual Studio Code or NetBeans or Eclipse. Whatever you want to use is fine. But if you're going to follow along, we'll use IntelliJ today. So I'll open this up in IntelliJ. We have everything. We have the bootstrapped application. We have what we need to write some code. So what are we waiting for? Let's do it. All right, so when you are brought into IntelliJ, the first thing you want to do is just make sure your app can run. Go ahead and click on this play button here. And what should happen is the console will open here, and at the very end, we will see Tomcat started on port 8080. So this is the default port. This is something along with a lot of things in Spring that you can change via configuration, but we'll leave it on the default port. Now we can't access anything because we haven't done anything yet. So to get up and running quickly with a REST API, I'm going to create a Java class. I'm going to call this home controller. And in Spring, we use a lot of annotations because they make for declarative expression of what we want to do with something. So in this case, I called it a home controller. That is not something you need to do. You can call it whatever, but I like to call it that so I know what it is. What makes this controller, a controller is the annotation. So we use the REST control annotation. It says this class is going to accept requests and return responses. So now what I can do is there are some annotations to provide endpoints for the different HTTP verbs. In this case, this is a GET. So we know that at /, which will be localhost 8080 /, this is the method that's going to be called. This is the endpoint that we're going to hit. So in this case, we're just going to return a string, and we're going to return the message, hello world. So that is all we have to do to get a REST API up and running. If we go ahead and rerun our application, again, this is a GET request. We can come over to the browser and go to localhost 8080, and you'll see that message, hello world. If you're in IntelliJ and you have the Ultimate Edition, I believe you need for this, you can come in and say, hey, I want to generate a request in IntelliJ's built-in HTTP client. You can do so, and then you can run it from here, and we see that we get hello world. You can also do this from the command line using something like curl. I also have a utility called httpy, which is kind of like curl, but a little bit easier to use. And so if I run that there, I also get hello world. So that is the parlor trick of getting a REST API up and running in Spring. Very quick to do, but again, not very useful. We need to build something out that is a little bit more production ready. So I want to kind of continue on with this theme of a meetup. And so I'm going to get rid of this. Actually, let's just leave it there. And what I'm going to do is now I have a choice. Now I can organize my code however I want. Spring gives you the flexibility to organize your code however you want. If you've been in the world of MVC before, you've probably seen applications structured in a model view controller fashion, where I might come in here and declare a package of model, a package of controller, a package of service and repository, etc. The problem with that is then it kind of goes against everything Java is, right? Because if I have all these different packages and the home controller needs to call the group service, then it has to reach out of its package. And so everything has to kind of be public. I prefer a package by feature approach. And in this case, everything related to our group feature will be in the group package. So to get started, I need to model a group in my application. So I'll come in here and create a Java class. Now you could use just a normal class. This is where Java gets a lot of its bad rap from, when you have class files that are really just representing a type in your system, and they're 100 lines long just to hold some fields and have some getters and setters. Java has grown up since then. In fact, this is a long time ago. We're at JDK 25. Records came in JDK 16. So we're going to create a record. And this allows us to just say, what are the components of a group? In this case, I'm going to have a long ID, a string name, maybe a description, right? We'll have what city it's in. We'll have who the organizer is. Now, this would probably be an actual member or user later on, but for now, that's okay. And then we might have a local date for the created date, right? So now we have a group in our system. This represents the type. The next thing we need to do is we need to set up a repository where all of the data for this group will live. And in fact, let's not do that now. This will kind of be more in the Spring Boot 4 full course. Let's just set up another controller. So let's go ahead and create a controller. We'll call this our group controller. All right, again, I'm going to mark this as a REST controller. And now we can start to add some functionality here for our groups. One thing I didn't do last time, because we only had one mapping, is I can set up a request mapping for this entire class. So I might say that everything here falls under API/groups, and then we can build a REST API built based off of those endpoints, right? Okay, so one thing that we're going to need to do is set up some actual data for this. So I might say private list of group. We might call this groups, and we'll initialize this to an array list. Now, this is something that we are going to do in the future, but you probably wouldn't have this in the controller. The controller is just to take requests and return responses. But again, this is something we can refactor on later. For right now, we'll just go ahead and add some groups in here. So I will do this in a constructor. So let's create a constructor. And what I'm going to, oops, no, I didn't want to include that, because what I'm going to do is create my groups here. So when this class is created, we'll go ahead and create some groups. Now, I pasted those in, so we didn't have to watch me go ahead and type this out. When we go ahead and create a new ID for each of those, I'm going to use an atomic long. So atomic long, there we go. We'll call this ID counter, and that equals a new atomic long with an initial value of 1. If you're curious what this is, you can jump into the docs. Again, this is a long value that may be updated atomically. So an atomic long is used in applications such as atomically incremented sequence numbers and cannot be used as a replacement for a long. So we're going to use that to basically increment the ID there for each of the groups. So in our constructor, we create 4 groups, and that way we have some data in here. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to have a method to get all of the groups. So I'll go in here and I'll remember those annotations, one of which is get mapping. And so now the endpoint for this is going to be /API/groups. and then slash. So we are kind of following the conventions of building a REST API here. So we'll say public. Actually, we don't even need to make this public. And again, we can go ahead and do this, right? Because we don't need that. And what we can do here is we can say that we are going to return a list of groups. We can say get all groups, and then it will return groups. So let's go ahead and test this out. We'll rerun our application. Again, you can go to a browser if you want. I can use the HTTP client here. So I'll say run a GET request on localhost 8080/API/groups. And we do not have that. So what is wrong here? API/groups, that is different than that. Let's go ahead and run that. And now we see that all of the data is returned in JSON format. So it knew, based on this type, a list of groups, because of the dependencies that were kind of transitively brought in from the WebMVC Spring Boot starter, one of the things behind the scenes that it does is it uses Jackson to deserialize this. We got a list of groups back. It knew by default you wanted JSON, so it was able to turn that data into JSON data. That is not something you have to do on your own. So we have our list, where we have our list of them. Let's go ahead and add one more here. So I may want to get an optional of group back and say get group by ID. What I can do is, to do this, I can go ahead and stream this. And with a stream, I can filter. So I'm going to filter on the g.id. And what we want to do is we want to check if that is equal to the ID that was sent into this method. Now, what we can do here is go ahead and say this is a get mapping by ID. And what we're doing here is we're saying that this is going to be part of the path. So we have an annotation to say that this is a path variable, and now this can come in as a long. Finally, we'll just go ahead and find the first. All right, so now if we go ahead and rerun this, we can also go ahead and generate this request. So we want to get one with the ID of 1. If I run this, we get that. If I go ahead and change that to 2, then we get that. So those are our kind of starting methods. I could easily go ahead and add some more in here. If I wanted to, I can go ahead and have one for save, which would satisfy both our creation and our deletion. And then I can have a delete method to remove if that group existed. Now, again, this was just kind of my hand wavy parlor trick, because this is a controller. You don't want to mix business logic in here. You would want to delegate that to another class, whether it be a service or a repository. And the reason for that is, yes, this is just a controller. It takes in requests and turns in responses. But here we're kind of going against some patterns here, one of which is the single responsibility pattern, right? This thing does a lot more than it should. Really, what we should do is we should be able to put this in another class, delegate that responsibility to that, and then it becomes much easier to test. So there is a lot more we can do here, but I think I'm going to cap it at this. And again, I think this is a really good start, but I hope this conveys just how easy it is to get up and running building a REST API in Spring. All right, there you have it. Building a Spring Boot for REST API fairly quickly. If I didn't talk through all of those things, it would have been a matter of minutes, but I did want to try to explain some of those things as we went. But I hope this kind of conveys the message that it is easy to get up and running with Spring, building a REST API, building that CRUD functionality out. There isn't a lot to it, but again, just kind of a hand wavy parlor trick. As we start to build real world applications, there's going to be more that goes into this: configuration, profiles, testing, different layers in our stack, like our service layer, our repository layer. What kind of database are we going to use? Are we going to use in-memory? Are we going to use some type of H2 database, maybe a Postgres database? Are we going to containerize this? a whole bunch of decisions there before we even get to production. Now we need to talk about like profiles and what type of artifact are we building? What type of environment are we pushing this application to? So a whole lot of things to discuss and things I would like to discuss in a full course for the new year. Again, if you're interested, let me know in the comments below if that's something you're interested and what you might want to see covered in that course. Well, friends, I had some fun putting this together today for you. If you learned something new, please do me a favor, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.